dari kota Yogyakarta. Inilah Borobudur Writers and Cultural Festival 2022 dengan tema Membaca Ulang Pemikiran Haryani Santiko, Durga di Jawa, Bali, dan India. Selamat pagi, selamat berjumpa kembali sahabat BWCF, salam budaya. Tak terasa kita sudah ada di hari ketiga perhelatan BWCF yang ke-11. Dari pagi sampai siang, nanti kita akan mengikuti rangkaian acara ceramah umum dan simposium. Sahabat BWCF, pertama kita akan mengikuti rangkaian ceramah umum seri 3 Prambanan dan Arkeologi. Cecelia Levin, Ph.D. dari Independent Curator Associate Department of South Asian Studies, Harvard University, Amerika Serikat, akan memaparkan The Ramayana of Loro Jonggrang, Sita Story bersama moderator Djaliati Sri Nugrahani, MA. Dan di pukul 10.45 akan menyimak webinar rangkaian ceramah umum seri kedua, Durga dan Kali, dengan pemateri Bettina Wittiven, German artist and writers, seorang fotografer, penulis buku fotografi, Secret Sister dari Amerika Serikat. Beliau akan memaparkan topik Secret Sister, Kali, dan Contemporary Photography. Sesi ini dimoderatori oleh Ibu Restu Imansari Kusumaningrum. Baik, sahabat BWCF, mari kita akan segera mulai untuk webinar kali ini.
Selamat pagi, good morning, and good evening to Ibu Cecelia Levin, who is in New York. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semuanya. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan, Rahayu. Bapak Ibu, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the Committee of the Borobudur Writers and Cultural Festival 2022 that gave me the opportunity to accompany our honorable speaker, Cecelia Levin, Ph.D., who is going to share her expertise in the third general lecture of the Borobudur Writers and Cultural Festival program. I would like also to thanks to all participants who come from many different academic background and institutions, including teacher and student from many affiliations. Before entering the core of the public lecture, let me first introduce our honorable speaker. Cecelia Levin is an art historian specializing in the art and archaeology of South and Southeast Asia. She obtained her doctorate from the Institution of Fine Art, University of New York. Her career spans the teaching of Asian art history at several colleges and universities, as well as curatorial and research participation at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Asia Society, the Asian Museum Art of San Francisco, and the Museum of Fine Art, Boston. She also served as director of the Festival Indonesia Kias, a nationwide presentation of the Indonesian art and culture. 11 areas are specialization, including the sculpture tradition of the ancient Javanese period, classical Javanese school, and modern of visual narration of the Ramayana in Asia. She received numerous grants in support of her works, and has written a broad array of topics related to historical and contemporary art Asia. Bapak Ibu, our honorable participant in this moment, Cecelia Levin is going to present her topic on Ramayana Loro Jonggrang, the story of Sita. Bapak Ibu, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to invite Ibu Cecelia Levin to share her expertise. The forum will be about 1.5 hour, 30 minutes for the presentation, and the rest is for the discussion. Ibu Cecelia, the Zoom room is yours, and Bapak Ibu, enjoy the lecture. Please. Ibu,
I'm sorry, I still need to get the PowerPoint
it's all right.
shared. Let's see. No,
Not yet.
not yet. Belum,
Yes.
belum. Okay, I'm still waiting to, okay, luar biasa.
Yes, it's there. Okay.
Right there, everyone can see it.
Yes. But will you please do, okay.
Right, okay, we got it?
Yeah.
Okay, first, I want to thank everybody for inviting me to participate in this wonderful event. I'm thrilled because there are so few people from the United States who are involved, and Indonesia has been at the heart of my work for several decades now. And I hope that my talk tonight will inspire future connections between the scholars and the museums and institutions in my country and yours. Thank you as well for the beautiful introduction that you just gave me, Boo. Okay, matulun. When I was first asked to participate in this conference, and it was on Durga, the first Durga I thought about was my car. And I decided this really wasn't the best solution, and the committee encouraged me to talk about the Ramayana at Loro Jonggrang, which was my dissertation topic, and my research on it is now a quarter of a century old. And I think by talking about this topic and showing you these incredible reliefs, it's my hope that I'll encourage the next generation to now go back and look at these extraordinary monuments that you have in your country. You're so lucky. And not only Loro Jonggrang, Borobudur, those in East Java, Jatim as well, and to start rethinking them in new ways. So, to continue, throughout the centuries, the Javanese love of epic storytelling has been conveyed through myriad means, from wayang kulit and dance to oral recitations and wayang beber narrative scrolls. And these boundless expressions have received worldwide admiration for their extraordinary richness and creativity. Highlighted among these exemplars is the unique series of sculptural reliefs depicting the Ramayana from the mid-9th century Hindu temple complex of Loro Jonggrang in central Java. Nothing comparable exists in Asia from any other time or any other culture, including the epic's original homeland on the Indian subcontinent. Comprised of 72 sculptural narratives that line the two terraces of terraces of two of the main shrines, 42 on Chandi Shiva and the remaining 30 on Chandi Brahma. The story is brought to life through an uncommon and virtuoso mixture of visual narrative compositions, encompassing the monoscenic, sequential, synoptic, and continuous methods. Moreover, it remarkably illustrates all 7 books of the epic, including the final Uttarakanda, relating the events following Rama's return to Ayodhya and Sita's subsequent challenges. Earliest scholarly explorations into this series were undertaken approximately a century ago during the Dutch East Indies era, and followed the prevailing philological approach towards archaeological studies. Therefore, literary prototypes for Java's sacred sculptural narratives were exclusively pursued. Yet, despite all efforts, the reliefs defied a match with any single source. Links could be made with various literary Ramayana recensions, including Valmiki's classic version, the Bhattikavya, a 7th century poetic work composed for the teaching of Sanskrit grammar, and the somewhat contemporary Jawa Kuno Ramayana Kakawin, and finally the Hikayat Seri Rama, the earliest extant Malay book attributed to the 16th century that recounts an Islamized variation in a rather disconnecting, rambling manner. Beginning in the post-independence era, the rich cultural manifestations of classical Java were seen anew through the creative interpretations of Claire Holt, who presented an array of authentic Javanese aesthetic responses to borrowed Indian classical forms. Several decades later, the 1992 restoration of Loro Jonggrang's 3 main shrines reunited the relief series in their entirety, including those depicting the Krishnayana on Chandi Vishnu. This ushered in a new generation of scholarship, one that brought a new level of understanding to Java's epic narratives. These studies, undertaken by the renowned scholars, the late Eddie Djaliati and Jan Fontaine, proposed that Loro Jonggrang sthapatas and sculptors had knowledge of Indic source material beyond literary storylines. Most specific was the ancient dramaturgical manual, the Notre Shostro, a compendium of theatrical codifications for the telling of a particular story. More significantly, the text delineates the guidelines for successfully evoking Rosso, a formulated series of emotional states intended to reverberate in audiences and viewers. While Djaliati's analysis centered on the sthanas, or the standing postures depicted in the narrative reliefs, Fontaine evaluated the hastas, or the hand gestures. Many were employed among the narratives of Borobudur, as well as those of Loro Jonggrang. I followed in their footsteps, discovering even further conventions of body language, in addition to parallels between formulas employed in Sanskrit poetics and their transliteration into visual language at Loro Jonggrang. Nonetheless, and irrespective of any identifiable sources and approaches, it must be recognized that the Ramayana of Loro Jonggrang has at its heart a plethora of contemporary counterparts, and embedded in these stones are details from fables, tales, and apologues, ones imparted through the conventions of that particular time and underscoring differing emphases. Further, it can be imagined that the epic may have been spread through shorthanded means, such as pakem or balungan, and interpreters were free to conceive their own particular embellishments. All these factors may have encouraged the rapid evolution from Indic models to more traditional Javanese pictorial expressions. However, in contrast to the mutable and fleeting nature of all storytelling, which changes with every performance or rendering, the stones of Loro Jonggrang are permanent and frozen in time. And one is very fortunate to have this singular visual text, as I call it, expressing the monument's sanctity and the epic's sacredness, while documenting a variety of aesthetic responses, visual preferences, and a Jungian collective consciousness of the temple complex's original worshipers. Now that we have moved into a new century and millennium, one can ask, through what new ways can we enrich our understanding and appreciation of these exceptional narrative cycles? Therefore, in light of our evolving perspectives on cultural diversity, equity, and inclusivity, a phenomenon currently experienced throughout the world, as well as in honor of Dr. Haryani Santiko and the goddess Durga, a proposed new interpretation is through the female gaze. That is what we call through the female point of view, and a revised view of Loro Jonggrang's other protagonists, mainly Sita. Moreover, and from a much wider landscape, we could begin to consider whether women played a role in shaping this story in historical Java, and if so, in what ways? The first time we meet Sita is in the Sayembara episode, the competition to win the princess in marriage. Here, the dichotomy between the realms of hero and women is clear, as Rama demonstrates his prowess through breaking Janaka's bow and is portrayed in the heroic Mandalastana. Sita is depicted in the Tribhanga, or triple bent pose, one associated with great beauty. Throughout the Indic tradition, she is lifeless and statuesque, suggestive of her role as a trophy prize, or as we would say in America, a trophy wife. Her appearances in the following episodes continue in this rather nondescript vein, as if she's a mannequin, and as if her inclusion is only due to narrative necessities. This mode will continue to the sighting of the golden deer and Rama's pursuit of Maricho. Even in this pivotal scene, she is pictorially defined as somewhat disconnected from the narrative, with the emphasis instead on the consequences of her action and Rama's heroism. One would think that the two continuous episodes relating Sita's kidnapping would awaken our heroine's emotional life while visually depicting the dramatic intensity of the event. Yet, she remains almost doll-like with a generic and emotionless face. In response to the surprising assault by Ravana, Sita bends her right leg, suggestive of her attempt to escape, yet her left leg parallels that of her abductor, psychologically sending a contradicting visual message of her compliance. It actually looks to me as if they're dancing. These qualities resonate in the following scene as Puspaka carries Ravana and Sita off to Lanka. Her posture again suggests her submission, and she is utilized more as a required narrative prop as she hands over her ring to Jatayu. Yet, while Sita remains somewhat of an abstraction, the drama of the episode is richly related through a Greek chorus of secondary characters and consequential actions. Ravana's grasping of Sita triggers the knocking over of containers of grain, much to the benefit of a nearby hungry animal. The rooftop birds are oblivious to a surprise attack soon to happen by a rodent, and a servant holds up her hands in a universal gesture of great surprise. Further, in the leftmost corner, another visual shlesha, or pun, is portrayed. The tempting of a monkey with a piece of fruit held by a servant echoes the enticement of Sita by Ravana in his mendicant disguise. It would be wrong to conclude that these early stylized, sedate, and emotionally bankrupt portrayals of Sita were the result of her perceived role in the epic. It is perhaps through the subsequent appearance of Sita in the Ashoka garden scene, from the Sundarakanda, the fifth book of the epic, that one actually meets the heroine for the first time. Loro Jonggrang's interpretation of the Ashoka Garden episode takes place after the rather heated exchange between Ravana and Sita, and undoubtedly demonstrates the most bravura and unique use of visual narrative known in any part of Asia. On the left, Sita and her royal companion, Trijoto, the Rakshashi, niece of Ravana and daughter of Vibhisono, notice a monkey in a tree, one that Sita suspects is an illusion created by Ravana. By means of a continuous narrative mode, Hanuman subsequently appears before Sita. He points back to an image of himself, an extraordinary visual method by which the sculptors of Loro Jonggrang have created a pictorial counterpart to the linguistic past tense, and imparts as well the fourth dimension, that of time. Thereby, it is understood that Hanuman witnessed the argument between Sita and Ravana, this excluded dramatic episode, and is conjuring such words as those he speaks to Sita in the Rāmāyaṇa Kakavin, which are, "I was very frightened when you talked just now to the wicked Ravana. It is really very dangerous. Thank God you escaped the sinful demon. Certainly Ravana will be killed by King Rama in battle. He has to pay with his life for his sins of kidnapping Our Lady." Here, a halo Sita sits in a Javanese pose with her arm turned backwards, a traditional posture emblematic of grace and beauty. She is no longer vacuous and responds to Hanuman's news with a broad smile. It reveals a heroine who exudes great confidence and can now rejoice in her determination and resolve, quite contrary to her previous lifeless interpretations. Further, the emphasis on her full form and feminine beauty is an antithesis to the literary depictions of the heroine during her imprisonment in the garden, where she is typically described as emaciated and anguished, tattered in tattered garb, and prostrates herself on the bare ground. What is puzzling is why the confrontation between Ravana and Sita in the Ashoka Garden is not portrayed at Loro Jonggrang, but implied instead through Hanuman's duplication and unique finger-pointing gesture. In the Ramayana Kakawin, this encounter reveals Sita as a woman of both bravery and defiance, who somewhat crudely, and perhaps not in line with the customary behavior of an Indian princess, addresses her captor as wicked and ten-headed and debased Ravana, deceitful mongrel, stupid and filthy imp. Sorry. The fact that this episode highlighting Sita's strengths and admirable personality traits is also absent from the only other extant visual example of the Ramayana from the Central Javanese period, the early 10th century ritual bowl from the Wanaboyo horde, is perplexing and perhaps suggestive of a particular convention now lost to us. Yet 2 of the 8 episodes on this gold masterwork center on Sita and the Ashoka Garden. On the right, she sits on an ambon, while Trijoto kneels before her, pledging her loyalty and obeisance. To the left, and in contrast, a distraught Sita is taunted by 2 Rakshashi who consider her quite foolish for her rejection of Ravana. After Hanuman's visit to Sita in the Ashoka Garden, Loro Jonggrang's Ramayana narratives return once again to Rama, as the prince Lakshmana, Sugrivo, and the monkey army cross the ocean to Lanka, so too do the visual narratives cross to the terrace of Chandi Brahma. Amid the myriad scenes of heroics and battles, emblematic of cosmic order and dharma, Sita and Trijoto make only a brief interruption, similar to a cinematic crosscut, by way of a monoscenic vignette as they await the outcome of the war. It is only after the victorious return of the main protagonist to Ayodhya does the story of Sita resume and, for a while, take preeminence. The narratives now turn to a visual encapsulation of the Uttarakhanda. Thus ends any literary correspondence with the Ramayana Kakawin, which concludes with the celebration of the royal homecoming. The remaining narrative sequences strongly resonate with the Valmiki telling of the epic, while encompassing several plot details related in the much later Hikayat Sri Rama. During an extended series of reliefs portraying the hero's return to Ayodhya, Sita once again figuratively and literally disappears into the background, now behind her husband. Following these are 7 consecutive episodes dedicated to Sita's abandonment and exile. These contrast dramatically with the previous palatial environment, and their forest settings are rendered quite naturalistically. The characters are related in a manner more in tune with traditional Javanese conventions. This is particularly true in the instance of Sita. The Loro Jonggrang's rendering of Sita's abandonment resonates with the Valmiki rendition, Sarga by Sarga, and inaugurates the turning of the story to Sita's plight. Lakshmana brings the rejected princess to the forest. This is immediately followed by a separate episode where he informs her of her fate. He sits at a level below that of the princess as a gesture of respect. The sequence continues with the abandoned princess surrounded by a great bestiary of forest denizens. While this imagery may underscore her isolation, it could potentially be a reference to the Valmiki recension, which tells of the loud shrieks of peacocks accompanying her abandonment, or suggestive of the forest animal's subsequent silence during her absence from Ayodhya. The heroine then arrives at the hermitage of Valmiki, where she bows in obeisance before the sage, revealing her gratitude for his shelter and protection. It may be considered a compositional mirror and role reversal of the earlier episode featuring Lakshmana. The birth of Lava finds Sita once again in an exclusive women's realm, and the depiction of only one infant follows the version of the story by which Valmiki creates Lava's duplicate through a great blade of grass. It appears in the later Hikayat Sri Rama. The subsequent episodes expand upon forest life and the growing up of the twins Kusa and Lava together with their mother in Valmiki's hermitage. The depiction of Sita in an awkward forward-bending pose and wearing the simplest of attire as she searches for food represents an empathetic contrast to her earlier appearance as a bejeweled princess fashioned in the Tribhanga posture. Once the twins are discovered and brought back to Ayodhya, the heroine makes only one appearance among the reliefs of Chandi Brahma, behind the figure of Valmiki as she is presented before Rama. It may be interpreted that she once again turns to the sage for protection, and the rather unorthodox yet natural manner by which she clings to his shoulder may imply a level of trust and comfort that the two characters have developed for each other during the princess's 12 years in exile. It is evident that a significant and ongoing narrative device practiced by Loro Jonggrang's sculptors is the pictorial equivalent of the Sanskrit poetic practice of dvani, or veiled allusion. Implied narration is once again demonstrated in the rather ambiguous last two scenes on Chandi Brahma. Sita's absences may lead to the assumption that she has rejected Rama and received the embrace of Mother Earth. In a similar vein, the depiction of the twins Kusa and Lala, now in courtly garb and reciting the story of Rama for their father, may be emblematic of Rama's abdication and their ascent to the throne of Ayodhya, followed by Rama's ultimate apotheosis. However, the succeeding and final banquet scene associated with the celebration of the twin brothers' coronation presents a rather anticlimactic ending to this great telling of the epic, and a somewhat unsatisfactory resolution. When turning, however, to the sculpture relief series on the terrace of Chandi Vishnu, believed to relate the youthful adventures of Krishna from the Krishnayana, an alternative ending to the Loro Jonggrang's Ramayana, and the fate of Sita may now be found. This initial relief, previously identified as a generic courtly environment, features a royal couple without halos. To the right, a pair of crowned twins adorned with sacred aureoles is portrayed. The inclusion of several elaborate vessels may be suggestive of the gift distribution accompanying important court rituals, one of the kind that may have led to the creation of the Wanaboyo bowl. It is therefore more than likely that this first episode on the main third shrine is actually a depiction of Rama's abdication and the coronation of Kusa and Lala, the ending of the Ramayana. The linkage of these two avatars of Vishnu creates a sacred unity while heightening the significance of these narrative sequences. Further, the incorporation of differing epic narrative themes on a singular religious shrine is an acknowledged later Javanese practice. It can now be suggested that this tradition had its roots in the earlier Central Javanese period. There are also several literary substantiations for this revised identification. In the Hikayat Seri Rama, Sita and Rama are united, and after a building of the new capital, they follow an ascetic life for the next 40 years. Fortuitously, there's also a predecessor for this storyline in the late 7th century Sanskrit play, the Uttara Ramacharita. Here, Sita's request to be joined with the earth goddess is denied, being informed instead that her earthly obligations have not been completed. This outcome is a significant reminder that the Ramayana is not only a sacred epic, but also lessons on Raja Dharma, or kingship. These ideals may have equally resonated with women as well as men. Sita returns to Rama because it is her spiritual as well as sacred duty. It is clear that two different stories are conveyed at Loro Jonggrang, one of Rama's heroics, the other of Sita's bravery and resilience as she undergoes great challenges and succeeds through her determination. At Loro Jonggrang, the male characters act, but the women feel. Undeniably, Instilled in the stones of Loro Jonggrang's Ramayana are other variations now lost to history, and visual clues that could only be read by its original viewers. Yet, Ramayana recensions from later eras attest to Sita's greater empowerment. There are Indian versions where it's Sita, rather than Rama, kills Ravana. In the Hikayat Ceramah, Hanuman visits the heroine princess again and asks her how Ravana can be killed. A 16th century Bengali version of the epic by the female poet Chandravati underscores the plight of the women characters and was most possibly written specifically for female audiences. One would like to imagine that the seeds for Sita's more powerful voice are somewhere also embedded among the reliefs of Loro Jonggrang, and that throughout classical Javanese history, there were songs, recitations, and visual expressions of the Ramayana circulating within the realm of women, ones created for and by women, in praise of Sita and womankind. Thank you very much for listening. Terima kasih. Matur nuwun.
Terima kasih. Thank you very much for the very enlightening lecture. Ibu Cecelia, would you please do? Oh, okay, thank you.
Do you want me to put the screen back on?
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry, maaf.
Okay.
I will.
Later on, probably.
There it is. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Again, thank you very much for the very enlightening.
Sorry about that. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the very enlightening lecture. Let's give a deep appreciation to the speaker by giving applause to Ibu Cecelia. Bapak Ibu, after listening the very inspiring lecture, I believe that there are many things to be questioned and commented. But before entering the Q and answer session, let me just provide a very brief highlight in bahasa. Bapak Ibu, secara garis besar perlu disampaikan bahwa penulis menyampaikan bahwa Ramayana Loro Jonggrang merupakan karya yang sangat luar biasa, unik, dan tak tertandingi. Oke. Penciptaannya mampu menghubungkan kisah heroik dengan dinamisme, keaslian budaya, dan kepekaan yang tinggi terhadap kondisi manusia. Lebih lanjut, dijelaskan bahwa penciptanya sukses dalam mentransliterasikan gambar visual yang mampu memotret karakter tokoh yang digambarkan. Satu hal yang istimewa ialah kisah Sita, yang ternyata menyiratkan spirit pemberdayaan perempuan yang di kemudian hari banyak diungkapkan melalui peran-peran perjuangan perempuan. The Ramayana Loro Jonggrang, Sita Story, menawarkan pemahaman dan interpretasi baru tentang Ramayana melalui sudut pandang perempuan yang kemudian menimbulkan rasa ingin tahu mendalam terkait apakah perempuan pada waktu itu mempunyai peran penting dalam panggung sejarah Jawa dan dalam hal apa. Dalam Ramayana Loro Jonggrang, Sita digambarkan secara dinamis, antara lain melalui stana atau pose dan gestur tubuhnya untuk merepresentasikan dinamika karakter, lebih tepat sebetulnya untuk membangkitkan suasana emosional. Mulai dari gestur yang merepresentasikan Sita sebagai wanita cantik yang penuh pesona yang didudukan dalam sebagai piala yang juga tampil dalam karakter budaya Jawa pada episode-episode yang berikutnya, sampai dengan ekspresi yang memancarkan kepercayaan diri yang besar dengan tekad yang kuat sebagai seorang pejuang wanita yang pemberani dan pemberontak. Satu hal yang menarik yang diungkapkan pembicara ialah episode kembalinya ke Ayodhya. Di sini sekali lagi secara kiasan dan harafiah Sita menghilang ke latar belakang. Sekarang berada di belakang suaminya. Sita kembali kepada Rama merupakan sikap spiritual dalam perjalanan tugas suci seorang perempuan. Sebagai Ramayana, sehingga Ramayana adalah juga pelajaran tentang Dharma. Cerita tentang Sita di Candi Loro Jonggrang dapat disebut sebagai ekspresi visual yang diciptakan untuk kemudian ditransformasikan ke dalam karya-karya oleh perempuan, untuk perempuan, dan dalam hal ini kesemuanya untuk memuji Sita dan kaum perempuan pada umumnya. Demikian highlight yang bisa saya sampaikan. Bapak Ibu, sudah ada 3 penanya di dalam kolom question and answer. Ibu Levia, what would you like the discussion to be carried out? One by one question you're answering, or I read the whole question and then you answer?
There are only 3?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd be happy to answer all 3 if I can.
All right. The first question is from Giri Nugraha. He mentioned that, thank you very much for sharing, ma'am. I would like to ask, what does it mean to navigate for the wholeness in Sita's heroine journey? And how does Durga archetype embodied in Sita journey? With love and gratitude, Giri.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
He asking the question whether the whole Sita journey is going to paralyze with Durga archetype.
My topic doesn't have anything to do with Durga.
Also, you can ask what is the Sita heroine journey means to the wholeness.
Mean to the
wholeness.
The wholeness?
Yes, the whole universe.
What is the idea of why I chose this particular way of looking at Loro Jonggrang?
Yes.
Okay, I understand. Saya menyerti. It has to do with the empowerment of women. Whether it's women of today or women of 9th century Java, or anywhere in between and in any culture. And this is something that we're starting to look at in much more in detail of the role of women in society. And so when, as I said in my talk, when I learned that this conference, everybody else was talking about Durga, and I was asked to talk about the Ramayana at Loro Jonggrang, I felt that focusing on Sita would be a way of complementing the main theme of this conference, which is Durga. And of course, there is a Durga sculpture in one of the shrines.
All right. Let me move into the second question from Samsul Idul Adha. This still relates to the question about the previous one, whether the Ramayana of Loro Jonggrang is an adaptation of the Ramayana Valmiki.
That's what makes this so incredible, is, as I said in the talk, it doesn't relate to any particular version. And in the beginning, one of the things is that 100 years ago, scholars always were looking at art as sort of like the offshoot of things that were written down or that were literary. That's why I said they were all looking for what is the prototype? What is the literary prototype? What, you know, in fact, the earliest scholars, colonial scholars, sort of felt, well, if it doesn't follow this, and this is true in the Kakavin as well, if it doesn't follow the text, or it doesn't follow what was done in the Sanskrit version, they didn't misunderstood it. That's why it's different, because the Javanese misunderstood it. So that was the original attitude. And as I said, we don't know the source of this. We don't know. It's the one, all we can accept is that this is the text itself. There's nowhere in Asia where you have all 7 books of the epic. So of course, they had to return to the ones by Valmiki to visually narrate the Uttarakhanda. But there's nowhere in Asia where you have all 7 books of the epic visualized this way. And when you realize that this last book has a lot to do with the story of Sita, why did they do this? Why didn't they just, embellish some of the chapters of the earlier books and end with the happy return to Ayodhya? Why did they illustrate the 7th book? We'll never know, but it was obviously known. And the fact that this version at Loro Jonggrang, which is mid-9th century, seems to have continued, these little episodic details that I mentioned, like Sita doesn't return to the earth goddess, that it ends up in a 16th century Malay version. That it was, just being carried for century through many parts of Southeast Asia. I mean, that was the interesting thing. I'm sorry, it's late at night here, so I'm not as coherent as I am in the morning with my cup of coffee. Right. Especially because we just had a holiday where we all overate yesterday. And anyway, when I worked on my dissertation, of course, I looked at the original research on these reliefs by the great Willem Stutterheim, who was one of the director generals of the Dutch East Indies Archaeological Survey, and his dissertation was on the first 2 temples, or actually just mainly the first temple, Chandi Shiva, because the other 2 were not reconstructed. And it was funny how he wrote as if the 16th century Malay literary version was the prototype for what we find on the mid-9th century reliefs at Loro Jonggrang. I mean, just because that was the way they were thinking. The literary source has to be first. So I think we just have to let go of this. And when we let go of this and we realize there were all these different variations going on, and every time there was a founding of a temple, there were ceremonies, and the Ramayana was performed for the court. And every time it was performed, it may have changed. That just what we have here is what was known at the court at this particular moment in time. And that's why we're so lucky to have it. It's not going to change.
All right. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention Pak Giri Nugraha. I hope you're happy with Ibu Cecelia answer. And there's still another question from Samsul Idul Adha following the previous question. How the local Saiwa cult related to this relief?
Sorry?
How the local Saiwa cult related to the relief?
What cult?
Saiwa cult.
Shiva
Yes.
cult. Yeah.
Yeah.
Directed to
the relief.
the relief.
Any relation to the relief, the Ramayana relief?
I'm not sure what you mean by cult, the Shiva cult.
The worship of Shiva.
Right, the worship of Shiva. Well, you know that chandis in classical Jawa were also the mortuary shrine for the deceased ruler. And that's what makes the chandis of Jawa very different from what you have in India. So each shrine was seen as the home of the deceased ruler, who upon his death, and I'll say his, but their death became a full-time god. So Javanese rulers were seen as sort of like part-time gods while they were on this earth. After their death, they became full-time gods. And the shrines were their home, where they could take form. And so Chandi Shiva, the Shiva inside, is the shrine is the representative of the apotheosis of the ruler, and where the ruler could come and take its form on earth. And as you know, they also perform Shraddha ceremonies, and these, because this whole apotheosis of the rulers were very important. And on one side of, I'm sorry, I'm going back, not only is it late at night, but I'm going back 25 years ago. But one side going up this main stairs to Chandi Shiva, you have a little compartment, and there you will find the remains of the cremated ruler, and some special gold ornaments that were emblematic of him as well.
I'm sorry.
That's what I mean by that. If that's what you mean by the Shiva cult, that this whole temple complex was dedicated to Shiva because this is the form that the ruler, upon his death, took.
So,
does that make sense? Does that help in giving you the answer?
May I highlighting your opinion about it? You're saying that the king who enshrined in the temple relating to the story of the Sita in the Ramayana relief. Is that okay? Is that true?
The king relating to the story of Sita?
Yes. Is that true?
No, because this tradition comes from India. And in India, as well as then what you find throughout Southeast Asia, the stories took place outside of the main shrine. And these stories really had much more to do with kingship. So you find them on the lower, sometimes you find them on the adhistanas or the bases of these shrines, certainly in places like Vietnam, as well as in India. I mean, there's nothing like Loro Jonggrang, where you have these terraces that you walk around this way. So I would say that the inclusion of the Ramayana, and then in later Javanese temples, the Mahabharata, that is the component that really is much more significant of kingship. The statuary within the shrine is much more associated with, in the case of Loro Jonggrang, Shiva. And then, of course, the other two, Brahma and Vishnu.
All right, thank you, Pak Samsul Idul Adha. I hope you're happy with Ibu Cecelia answer for your question. If you are not happy, you can write.
You can certainly ask another question.
Yeah, sure. Can we move to the another question? This come from Tommy Aryo Nugroho. He asks, what are the value of the reliefs that can be applied or inspiring in modern Western life?
The values of the reliefs. There we have to start thinking about the stories. As I said, in the loyalty, certainly in the case of Trijotto and Sita. I'm thinking now of Sita because that's who I spoke about primarily in terms of her value, her resilience, her determination. One of the episodes that is in the Kakavin, and it's absolutely beautiful, is while Rama is waiting to take his army across to Lanka to save Sita, he, in a very poetic way, talks about his longing for Sita. And so he too is shown multidimensionally, which you don't see on this temple for many reasons, is because, of course, there's not enough room. And also his heroics. And if you follow the story, after all, at the end, he abdicates for his sons. So righteousness is one as well. I mean, Hanuman as well. But I think if we had to take one value more than anything else, it would be loyalty. And doing what is right. Rama realizes it's time to abdicate. So doing what is righteous and loyalty, I think, would be the two main values that we can learn from the story of the Ramayana, whether it's the story of the Ramayana at Loro Jonggrang or anywhere in Asia. These were written not only as sacred texts, they were written as lessons on kingship, on proper kingship.
All right, it sounds very great. Pak Tommy, I hope you're happy with the answer, and we are following the next question from Pak Budiono Santoso.
Is that the question?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it again.
Was the creation of the Ramayana also reflecting conflict between Ayodhya and Lanka?
In what way? In what way would it be a conflict? Because Lanka is the home of Ravana and Ayodhya is the capital of Rama. And so Ravana is the bad demon and demon king, and Rama is the righteous good king. Is that the reason you're asking this question?
Not mentioned clearly in this question. He's just questioning whether there is also representing the conflict between Ayodhya and Lanka. Probably politically.
Geographically?
Not sure about it.
I just don't understand the question. I'm sorry. If
okay.
that is a conflict between two.
He mentioned that the epic story of Ramayana originally was created to discredit Lanka when there was a conflict between Ayodhya and Lanka.
To discredit Lanka?
Mhm.
Well, Lanka was the home of Ravana, so I mean, this was his kingdom. So I don't know what you mean. I don't understand what you mean by discredit.
Okay, Pak Budiono Santoso, probably you can write what do you mean by conflict between Ayodhya and Lanka in the following Q&A chat here.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I cannot develop your question properly, probably.
No, I understand. I'm beginning to get a sense of the nature of these questions, and I'm beginning to wonder whether your audience has a familiarity with the Ramayana, mostly through Wayang Kulit, or performing arts form. And that's why these questions are not similar to the kind of classical literary versions and the classical pictorial versions of the kind that I'm talking about. So we have to do translation, which is much more than just from Bahasa Indonesia to English.
Oh, all right. There is a comment from Diane Butler. Thank you, Diane. He is commenting on the first question that she mentioned that he is asking about parallel between female hero narratives. Does Dr. Cecelia feel there are any similarity qualities in Sita and Durga?
Any similarities between Sita and Durga?
Sita and Durga.
I would think in terms of their remember, Durga was a goddess who was created because the male gods could not destroy Mahisa, or a particular demon. And Durga, actually, the name comes from Sanskrit, from fortress. Durg is Sanskrit for fortress. So Durga, and that's why I named my car Durga, because to be difficult, it means difficult to go against. So I would say the similarities that we see as we get to know Sita and Durga, again, it's determination, a different kind of strength than what we would find in male strength. A female empowerment.
All right. Thank you. Thank you also for Ibu Diane Butler. And she also asking the question, Ibu Diane Butler is mentioned as dosen sukarela, prodi doktor kajian.
Sorry?
Yeah. He is a
Can't
lecturer.
hear you again. Huh?
Ibu Diane Butler is a lecturer at the Faculty of Cultural Sciences, Universitas Udayana, Bali.
Wonderful.
She asked, would you like to mention again parallel qualities between Sita and Durga, especially related to ruwatan purification on an inner and outer level? She also
I think she's more qualified to answer that question, actually.
Oh. Okay, Ibu Diane Butler.
So the inner and out, it's like I just said, both of them represent a female empowerment.
Yes. Exactly.
Difficult, as I said, Durga was created to kill a demon that the male gods couldn't.
Ibu Diane, hope you're happy that Ibu Cecelia mentioning you are more qualified to to describe.
I think she is. I think she is. And of course, the Balinese traditions are very different from what I'm speaking about now.
All right. Thank you. Okay. The next question is come from Josephine. She is questioning, how about the old Javanese Uttarakhanda? Is there any relationship between the old Javanese Uttarakhanda and the relief of the Brahma temple?
The old Javanese, there isn't an old Javanese Uttarakhanda. Oh, there is one that's much later.
Yes.
But no, there's no relationship.
Okay. Okay, let's see. There is a comment from...
Because remember, at the time this temple was built, the Ramayana Kakawin ends with the return to Ayodhya.
All right.
That's it. So that's why they returned to Valmiki's text to do the seventh book of the epic, primarily to Valmiki's text.
Okay. Let me see. I think it's already, the question is, can we open another session for the question? Probably there is someone who asks, who want to
Any
ask.
other questions?
It's already on you, already answered by you.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, there is from Giri Nugraha. With the best intention, might I ask, and if it is possible to get in touch via email with you? I'm going to
Absolutely. You know, that was one of the things I was going to suggest. If anybody has any questions, especially to do with some of the source material, or please feel free to be in touch with me through Academia EDU. And I think on the written copy of my paper, you'll find my email address, because I'd be very happy to continue the conversation. I have a feeling that I'm sort of an underdog here, talking about the Ramayana at Loro Jonggrang at a conference that really everybody else is talking about Durga, and that we're all trying to grasp some sort of connection between the two. And as I said, I think it really has to do with the power of women. That's the great commonality.
Oh, okay. We still have 10 more minutes for question and answer. If there,
Sure. Any other questions?
If there any other question? If there is no question, would you, Ibu Cecelia, would you please to say something as a closing statement?
I'm just so grateful to be here at this conference, to be participating at this conference, to be one. I think there's only one other person who lives in America who's been asked to be in this conference. I have been committed to Indonesian culture for several decades now. And as I said, when I was asked to speak about the Loro Jonggrang's Ramayana reliefs at a conference where everybody else is talking about Durga, I tried my best to try to make an interconnection, which of course, as I try to show, is through the power of women, and also to start to question the way that we have looked at historical monuments and religious monuments of this time, of the 9th century onward in the classical period. And when I say classical, I mean from like 750 AD all the way up to about 1500 AD or CE. And to start to look at them in, I'm not saying creative ways, but in different ways. And also to really be open, unlike the scholars in prior generations, to be open to the fact that we may not have any of the answers, just because when we look at classical Java and even up to today, there's so much emphasis in your culture on the oral tradition. In fact, my closest friend in Java is Prudencia. Some of you may have heard of her, who has the Oral Tradition Society, because it's something we're just starting to look at in America when we start to look at the Native Americans and their traditions and how stories were told from one person to the next. So really, what I was trying to get at is not cementing answers, but opening up to whole new ways of looking at narration and visual narration, and realizing that, yes, at the same time that this great royal temple complex was built, and of course it had to follow certain guidelines because it is a sacred temple complex. And also, as I mentioned, it was the burial shrine of the ruler. So it served these two purposes. We have to realize that outside of this temple complex, every day there were different versions of the Ramayana going on. Every day there we know that they did Wayang Kulit, Wayang Beber, or narrative storytelling scrolls, which I think were probably the model for a lot of what we see in the reliefs, and particularly the continuous reliefs at Loro Jonggrang, were sacred as well. And you know, there are very few of them left. I think maybe a few decades ago, there were only 3 performers of Wayang Beber, dalams of Wayang Beber. And it was these scrolls were considered to be sacred as well. So what I'm trying to do is to encourage the next generation to start to look at this material. Borobudur as well. Borobudur, we're always trying to think, scholars, particularly in the United States, is it a mandala? Is it a mandala? Is it a mandala? And my attitude towards Borobudur is more that, no, it's the stories that are telling us the meaning of this monument. And these stories, just like the language, and for those of you who know Javanese, you know you have Kromo and you have Prakit, and you also have pronouns that were only used by the rulers. So if you look at these reliefs of Loro Jonggrang, which is something I couldn't go into in my talk, you start to see almost like differentiations between the main characters. And that's another reason why I think they're so, Sita and Rama are almost doll-like, because they're more emblematic of types. And then you get to the secondary characters, and some of the servants and the abduction of Sita scene look like they come from the outer Indonesian islands. I mean, or even from places like Irian Jaya. And then you have them acting in a much more natural way with their hands going back like this, And so it's not just this difference between the way the male hero is depicted and Sita, the heroine, is depicted. Another way you could look at these reliefs and all of the many other storytelling reliefs from this time is also in terms of the classification of the characters in them. I think the reason why Rama and Sita are so unemotional, their faces are so unemotional, is because they were copied from particular pattern books. I mean, when I started to look at this topic again and again, I haven't looked at my dissertation in at least 2 decades. I had to read it again to prepare for this talk. And I see how emotionless they are, their faces, and how formulated their gestures are, especially Rama's, that they could come from pattern books that came from India or that were developed in the courts by court artists in Javas, how to depict a prince, how to depict Sita. And then you get to the secondary characters, the chorus, as I call them, and they're shown in a much more naturalistic way. There's a dissertation for somebody else to do someday. So this was more a talk in opening up thoughts rather than putting rules and regulations on things. And then all of a sudden, Sita is like a totally different character when you see her in that scene with Hanuman.
Right.
Totally different.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Where does that come from? You know, why? And why don't we have that important scene? And I didn't have time to show this, but yes, we do have that scene, that confrontation between Sita and Rama in Vietnamese Shivite temples from around the same time. Because I've written on that, and if you want, I could get in touch with me and I can send you, or it's in my listing in Academia EDU at Kyungmi, which is just a little bit later, about the year 1000. And at the Adhisthana, the base, you have a whole continuous narrative of Ravana confronting Sita. And then he storms off, and he's multi-headed, he storms off and he goes and he starts messing around, so to speak, or he takes comfort in the other women in his harem, you know. But there it's a continuous scene. Why don't we have it in Java at this time? Why is it only implied? And the Wonoboyo, talking about loyalty, I've written on that bowl as well. And that, I think, really has to do entirely with loyalty. Loyalty between brothers, between Lakshmana and Rama, loyalty between Trijoto and Sita. And that could be certainly emblematic of a gift that's being given to a high official of the court by a ruler or something. So going back to that question about what are the values that we find in the Ramayana and Loro Jonggrang, especially because it shows so much. There's an emphasis on Sita that you don't see in any other relief narratives in Asia. Is loyalty, devotion, and perseverance. These are very important. Yeah, to persevere. Isn't that something we could learn a lot about in these times as well, when things are so challenging?
Wow, that's very beautiful closing statement.
Yeah. As I said, I think being the outdog or outlier talking about the Ramayana Loro Jonggrang at a conference dedicated to Durga, as much as I try to connect them, there are just so many ways we could be looking at this topic.
Wow. I believe after listening to the lecture of Ibu Cecelia, I believe that there's still many questions and comment left.
Everybody is very welcome. You know, I really want to keep in touch with my colleagues in Indonesia. I also want to be involved in encouraging students and the next generation of scholars who will be working on this material. So please keep in touch with me with any of your questions. And maybe my answers will be better at 9 o'clock in the morning than at 10:30 at night.
Yes, you are right. I'm sorry for that. Okay, thank you very much, Ibu Cecelia. Ya, terima kasih. Unfortunately, I have to end it at this discussion. Once again,
thank you. It's been a joy and a pleasure, and I hope that I was able to make a contribution to this conference.
Yes. Thank you very much also for the participant who's still in the room until the end of the discussion. Thank you very much, Bapak Ibu. Saya undur diri dan mengembalikan forum ini kepada panitia. Atas semua kekurangan dan hal yang kurang berkenan, saya mohon maaf. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Matur nuwun. Thank you very much.
Matur nuwun. Okay. Naderiakan. Thank you for letting me be a participant in this wonderful conference. Good night now.